I know you're throwing it back to David, and one of the questions that people have asked and are wondering about, why should the average Contra Costa resident care about redistricting? And so we all understand it's very important, but if David or Karen could articulate that.
I think in that first slide, or one of the first, it's how much federal dollars we get and how we do that. Now, I know you're right, Matt, the average citizen just probably doesn't think about that a lot, but it goes to how the community gets to respond to the needs in each community. And as you know, homelessness is a big issue right now. Mental health issues are a big issue. I am a supporter of the president's Build Back Better program. We have transportation and traffic issues. So the average citizen who doesn't pay that much attention to government in general, this is a way where their tax dollar is allocated back to them.
And that's wonderful. And that's one of the reasons why we have this program today. And I think it's very important for educating our citizens about how important it is, this redistricting, and of course, the census that we recently had. So David, we're going to kick it over to you. Christine passed the ball. And if you would like to talk about this, the redistricting as it's being done.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having us this morning to talk about this. Once I run through a number of slides, obviously we'll take questions, and both Supervisor Mitchoff as well as Christine and I would be more than happy to answer that. Real quick, again, as you all know, we do this every 10 years. The last redistricting occurred in 2011. There are a number of ways that redistricting can be done. You can have a redistricting commission, and that's actually what they have at the statewide level. There is a California redistricting commission that is working on the issues related to statewide offices as well as the state legislature. In Contra Costa County, the Board of Supervisors is responsible for drawing the maps. And we have to rely on the official U.S. Census data, which came out in what we call legacy format at the end of August, but it is the California official data that came out on September 20th of this year that we actually have to use for it. And the reason we have to use the California data is that specifically allocates a number of people who are incarcerated in institutions at the statewide level, and it allocates those back to each supervisorial district. The number actually made relatively small changes in that regard for Contra Costa County, because traditionally we have not sent a lot of people to the state prisons. We've managed them at the local level.
Which no good deed goes unpunished, because we did such a good job when former Governor Brown decided to send prisoners back to the counties. Since we didn't have as high of incarceration rate, we didn't get as much money. But in Contra Costa County, the cost of living is much higher than it is in Kern County. Karen will now get off her soapbox.
Thank you, Supervisor Mitchoff. So this is what the map currently looks like based upon the 2011 redistricting. As you noted when Christine was talking, she talked about the demographic analysis by race and ethnicity by district, both by the total population and also what's called the citizens voting age population. By law, these two categories are required to be shown on each and every map that is created for redistricting purposes, so that the public and everybody can get an idea in terms of what these numbers look like. The one thing to caution you on, of course, is that the numbers are not 100% accurate, because some of the data had to be derived from what we call the American Community Survey, which is also done by the Census, but it's done over a 5-year period. And that 5-year period ended in 2019. So that data is slightly different than the data that we would actually have as a result of the census data that came out in September. But as you can see, based on the 2011 map and the growth in the county, which of course, as we know, never is 100% divided among the 5 districts. Right now, we have what's called a deviation of 7.91%. That means some districts are a little higher than the mean being, of course, what would happen if the population was equally distributed in each district. And so by law, you're allowed at what's called a 10% corridor. One district can be up to 5% above the mean, and another district could be up to 5% below the mean. This gets a little complicated, but the way it works out is you take the district that is the highest above the mean, and you take the district that is the highest below the mean and add those two together. So in our case, the current distribution ends up with this number over here, 7.91% below the mean. So California has some very strict requirements in terms of redistricting. We have to, by law, we have to complete this by December 15th. And during that period, the board has to hold at least 4 public hearings. Currently, we have 5 scheduled, plus a number of workshops. At least one before the maps are drawn. So we had one in August. We had another one on October 5th. And now we're going to have the next one's going to be on October 19th. One of the meetings has to be in the evening. So the one coming up on October 19th will actually start at 6:15. As you can see, it says one of them has to be on Saturday, Sunday, or after 6 p.m. in order to make sure that we comply exactly with all of the redistricting laws. We said, okay, we're going to start at 6:15 just to be safe. The other thing you should notice is by law, the public hearings are at a fixed time. Now, all of you have had public hearings either at the city level or at the county level that have been scheduled for a specific time, but typically because of other matters that are going on, we may not get to those public hearings until sometime after the scheduled time. The redistricting ones are very specific. It says you have to start at the scheduled time. The only exception is you can conclude any item that's currently being discussed before you get to that. So that's why we have most of our redistricting meetings are set for 9 a.m. Again, so that we can actually be first and not have other items that conflict with it. But the one coming up next week, as I said, will be in the evening to comply with the other requirement of the act. So here's the schedule in terms of what we, as I indicated, our first one was on August 10th. And then on September 20th, we had the official California state adjusted information. We had the second one on October 5th. Coming up next week will be the evening meeting. And then we're going to do a series of workshops, as Supervisor Mitchoff mentioned, one for each of the supervisors. The first one will actually be on Saturday morning, and I'll talk a little bit about the workshop schedule in a minute. And then we've got 2 more scheduled, November 9th, as well as November 23rd. And again, all of this is really set in a very concise timeline, but it's necessary in order to complete the redistricting by the December 15th deadline. So here's the workshop schedule. First one's going to be on Saturday, October 23rd, and this will be at the San Ramon City Hall. It's hosted by Supervisor Anderson. The next one is on Sunday, the next day, and that'll be at the County Administration Building in Martinez, hosted by Supervisor Burgess, and then so on. So we have Karen's, which will be at 7 p.m. at the Pleasant Hill Community Center on Monday, October 23rd. And as Supervisor Mitchoff indicated, we would certainly like you to publicize that as well for anybody who might be interested in attending. And then we have one each night for the rest of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday hosted by the other supervisors. In addition to that, we have some community workshops. These are technical workshops that were scheduled for the public to learn how to use the mapping system that we have. We contracted with an organization called District R, and essentially they provide the official mapping program that we have. We have a dedicated website for the redistricting. This is required by law in terms of having a dedicated site. It also is required that everything that we compile based on the redistricting has to go onto that site and has to be maintained for 10 years. So it'll provide a good basis for whomever has to do the redistricting in 2031. So we had the first one on September 15th. There is a second one today, and the one this afternoon, which will be starting at 4 p.m., is conducted in Spanish. And the third one will be tomorrow at 2 p.m., and that'll be in English. And again, all of these will be hosted by District R. If anybody is interested, they could go to our website and actually get the information and sign in as part of any of those workshops. So one of the things in California is we have some very specific laws in terms of not just how the redistricting process works, but what are the priorities. And the priorities are ranked. So as you can see from this list, the first one is supervisor districts have to be geographically contiguous. Obviously, that makes pretty good sense. The second one is the one that most people focus on, which is the geographic integrity of a community of interest has to be respected, so it minimizes its division. And I'll talk a little bit more about what community of interests are and aren't in a moment. And then the third one is geographic integrity of a city should be respected. And we've tried to do that in Contra Costa County in our past redistrictings as well as this one. But of course, we have some very large cities. And so it's somewhat very difficult to make sure those cities are all in a particular supervisor district. So right now we have the cities of Pinole, the city of Walnut Creek, and the city of Antioch that are split between supervisors. And then, of course, it says they should be easily identifiable and understandable and so on. So as we've looked at redistricting opportunities, we've used the ranked priorities to say, okay, here are the things that we have to keep in mind. So what is a community of interest? This is taken right out of the statute, which says basically it's a population that shares a common social or economic interest that should be included within a single district for purposes of fair and efficient representation. But it can be just about anything as a practical matter. So here's some very quick examples. Obviously, urban versus rural interests, housing patterns, social interests, city boundaries, school district and school district attendance areas, and so on. There are about as many examples of possible communities of interest as you can imagine. And on our dedicated redistricting website, we have a much more comprehensive list that you can take a look at it if you're interested. So as I indicated, essentially the population growth has been covered. Christine had talked about that. And as I indicated, the numbers that came out in September included the incarcerated population relocation numbers. So here's another version of what that looks like in terms of who's over and under in terms of the deviation. So obviously, if ideal population would be 233,613 in each supervisor district. As you can see, in terms of where the population is, some districts are above that, some districts are below that. And as I indicated, what you do is you take the one that is the highest in terms of over the mean, in this case, is Supervisor Anderson's district at 4.35%, and the one that is highest below the mean, which in this case would be Supervisor John Joya's, who's minus 3.56%. You total those up and you get to this number here, 7.91. And again, the legal requirement is to keep below that 10% total deviation. So for one of the things that we've tried to do, of course, is give the public an opportunity to draw their own maps. And so you can go to our dedicated redistricting website. There's all kinds of instructions on there besides the videos that we've talked about in terms of showing you how you can draw any proposed map that you want, either a map that covers what you believe is an appropriate community of interest, or a map that basically sets out how you think the supervisor districts should look. These maps, any maps that are drawn, become part of the public record and have to be included in the discussions at the county board level. So just to give you one example, here's an example of a map that was drawn by an individual. The format is going to be slightly different because we've changed how we present the citizen voting age population numbers. But essentially, as you can see, this person drew a map that showed a total deviation of a little over 2%. Now, in this case, they reversed the districts. So they have District 1, which would be John Joya's district here, and Candace Anderson's district number 2 over here. Now, we don't know whether this was mistaken on their part or whether they actually intended to reverse the districts. But for any map drawn by the citizens, we don't change any of the data or any of the information that's in it. So we just present it as it is, along with a written description. So if you go to our dedicated website, what you'll see if you go down the list of it is the submission gallery. So any and every map that's or community of interest or comment that is provided actually gets recorded on here. So as you can see here are maps that were presented. Here's basically a comment. So we show it as a megaphone. And then there are also communities of interest, and we show those in a slightly different fashion. So you can click on any of these, and you can you can't change what they've submitted, but you can comment on it saying, I like this map, or I don't like this map, or you can also draw your own map if you like. But it gives the public ample opportunities to actually participate. So one of the things we've tried to do is do a robust outreach to the public. So besides the public hearings, besides all the notices we put out, we have done a number of things. You can subscribe again on our redistricting website. And if you subscribe on here, then any data is created or is pushed out, we would send you an email giving you an update on it. We also have the dedicated website reviews, and we've seen a little over 4,000 contacts there. And then Twitter and outdoor posts, which of course everybody uses nowadays. You can see almost 100,000. So for every public hearing we do, we attach as part of our board order a complete communications report. And it can be quite lengthy once we get done, but it provides in much more detail of this information that we've talked about. So again, as I indicated, one of the big concerns is this December 15th deadline. By law, we must be done by then. Now, some of you may recall that the California Supreme Court extended the timeline for the California Redistricting Commission by 12 days. So instead of December 15th, they had until December 27th to complete their work. And it's the California Redistricting Commission that does the statewide offices, does the legislative districts. There also was a bill signed by the governor that basically adjusted the state deadlines to account for the change that the California Supreme Court made. However, none of this action impacted the statutory requirement that applies to cities and counties. So for the county, the deadline is December 15th. For the cities, the deadline is different because the way the deadline works is you count back from the primary election date, and you have to go back 174 days. Since most cities don't have their primaries until the fall of 2022, the deadline for cities is in April. I think it's around April 17th, but I don't recall if that's the exact date. But in our case, December 15th is that date. So we're obviously going to meet that deadline. One of the things that happens, of course, is, as you know, for people who want to run for county offices, for example, or for any of the statewide offices, the signature in lieu of filing starts, or normally would have started on December 16th. But because of these changes, the Secretary of State has extended the signature in lieu filing period for petitions for 7 days. So that date now becomes January 3rd, and the number of signatures required has been reduced. So if you need more information as it relates to that, you can actually get that from the clerk recorder's office. So at this point, I'm going to actually change to a different file now.
Oh, you are going to put up the maps. I just sent
absolutely.
them. Thank you. I just sent them to Christine. But I see Bob Brown has a question. Do you want to ask your question while David's switching screens?
Sure. I think it's quick. I was just curious if thanks, Karen. I was just curious if there's any consultation, best practice, that type of discussion between the regional work done at the county level and the Citizens Redistricting Commission, or they're completely separate conversations.
We look at their material, and obviously they can look at ours. Technically, if a person wanted to go to the California state site, you could actually draw a map that could be submitted onto the county system through the statewide system as well. We have not seen any proposed maps come through in that fashion, at least so far. But in reality, because their focus is on the statewide offices and the legislative district offices, it does not impact on how we do the redistricting for the county. Now, ultimately, the clerk recorder's office, the election portion, is going to have to align all of this so that you would end up with an overlay on our map, for example, that would show what the maps look like for the legislative districts on top of our map. So we've put together a number of concept maps for the board to consider. So this is where I now give the disclaimer, and that is, these are maps that we have drawn based on some of the public comments we've received, as well as discussion at the board meeting on October 5th by the board. Just to give some basic ideas, so there's no magic in these particular maps other than there are ones for possible consideration by the board. Those of you who were involved or followed our redistricting in 2011 remember that there were more than 17 maps that were considered by the board, and then there were iterations of those maps. So there was 17A, 17B, etc. So we had a lot of maps last time. And we may end up with a lot of maps this time as well. But right now, these are the numbers we have. So concept map number 1 basically does a couple of things. It makes Pinole whole, so that would all be within one district. It provides for District 2, Candace Anderson's district, what we refer to as the San Ramon Valley, which are areas that have a community of interest very similar to that. It makes some change to Concord. This one gives District 5 a little chunk of the city of Concord, but it also provides that the airport would end up in District 5, and so that's an issue. And then, so that's pretty much what one looks like. And then basically, for each of the concept maps, we have to show the demographic analysis. So there are 5 maps, but they're repeated twice, once with the, as you saw, the larger scale, and then secondly, to show the demographic analysis, both by total population and then also by the voting age population. So this is concept map number 2. And as you'll note, what this one does is essentially it changes District 4, Supervisor Mitchoff's district, by adding in this area, it shows up here, right here, which is called Morgan Territory. There is a community of interest between that group as well as the city of Clayton. So this tries to capture that. It also provides a smaller increase over here in Antioch for District 3. And it also makes Pinole whole, also does the valley for District 2.